Well, Elvis was like before the Beatles. My picture of Elvis was
Tom Petty was a musician who stayed true to himself throughout his entire career. He never tried to be something he was not. His approach to rock and roll was straightforward and genuine. The music he created came from an honest place deep inside him. Many artists during his time were busy following whatever was popular at the moment, but Petty was different. He focused on finding truth in his music rather than chasing after trends. Instead of trying to impress people with flashy techniques, he worked on creating deeper connections through his songs. What made his music special was how effortless it seemed to listeners. But this simplicity did not come easily. Petty spent countless hours perfecting his craft, removing anything unnecessary until only the essential parts remained. He believed in finding the emotional core of a song and letting that guide everything else. His philosophy was to strip away excess and allow the heart of the music to shine through naturally. Growing up in Florida, Petty spent his youth listening to records that completely transformed how he viewed music. Each album he discovered opened up new possibilities and showed him different ways to tell stories through song. These records taught him various approaches to making people feel something genuine when they listened. He treated these albums like precious guides that showed him both the history of rock and roll and its potential future, as long as someone treated the genre with proper respect. Petty collected these albums carefully, studying them like maps that revealed where rock music originated and where it could still travel if handled correctly. He believed music needed space to develop naturally without being forced or constrained. Every song he created with the Heartbreakers was influenced by these 7 albums he treasured most. They taught him fundamental skills like writing memorable hooks that stayed with listeners long after the song ended. He learned how to sing truthfully without resorting to dramatic shouting or artificial emotion. These records showed him how to take just 3 basic chords and use them to express everything that needed to be communicated. The albums that shaped him were not complicated or overly sophisticated. Instead, they were fundamental and essential, like basic elements needed for survival. They were as necessary as water or air to someone who truly cared about rock and roll. These 7 albums represented the core of what Petty carried with him throughout his entire musical journey. The first major influence on Petty was Elvis's debut album from 1956. When young Tom heard Elvis for the first time, his entire perspective changed instantly. This album did not arrive quietly or politely. It burst onto the scene with tremendous force and energy. When Elvis sang songs like Blue Suede Shoes, the music sounded genuinely dangerous and exciting. The track Tutti Frutti exploded with pure joy and enthusiasm. Another song mixed gospel and blues together into something completely fresh and original. Listening to Elvis in Florida, young Petty immediately understood what his future would hold. He knew he would not end up working an ordinary job like most people. Instead, he would dedicate himself to playing rock and roll because Elvis made it look like the ultimate expression of freedom. Elvis appeared to Petty like a vision, unlike anything he had ever witnessed before. The way Elvis moved was completely unique. He sang as if no rules or limitations existed that could contain him. What fascinated Petty most was how Elvis could shift his voice from tender and gentle to wild and explosive within a single song. This incredible range captivated him. Elvis made these dramatic changes seem completely natural and effortless, like breathing. Petty studied this quality carefully and later incorporated it into his own singing style. His voice became conversational yet powerful, appearing calm while remaining capable of expressing anything. Beyond the technical aspects, what truly hooked Petty was Elvis's attitude. Elvis never apologized for who he was or felt the need to explain himself to anyone. He simply existed with complete confidence and certainty. This swagger was not artificial or put on for show. It was absolutely necessary for rock and roll to have this kind of presence. Petty carried this attitude forward throughout his career. Decades later, when he sang songs about refusing to back down, Elvis's influence was clearly present in that same determination and certainty. Elvis taught Petty that rock and roll represented freedom above all else, and once someone experienced that freedom, they could never return to their old limited way of living. The Beatles' album Help from 1965 affected Petty in a unique way. Everyone loved the Beatles, but this particular album resonated with him differently than their others. This record caught the band during a period of rapid growth and maturation. The music was still catchy and accessible, but now contained more depth and complexity. The title song sounded upbeat and cheerful on the surface, but the actual lyrics expressed desperation and need for support. The track Yesterday demonstrated their ability to create quietly heartbreaking music. Another song showed how Bob Dylan's influence was affecting their writing style. Petty absorbed several crucial lessons from this album. He realized that musicians could achieve popularity while remaining authentic and genuine. Artists could write hit songs that actually meant something real instead of being empty commercial products. The Beatles made creating great music appear simple and effortless. They crafted 3-minute songs with perfect melodies and harmonies that seemed like they had existed forever. However, underneath this apparent simplicity lay serious craftsmanship, hard work, and careful attention to every detail. Petty studied how they constructed their songs, paying attention to how every single word served a purpose, how melodies supported the stories being told, and how nothing was included unless it needed to be there. This economical approach became one of Petty's defining characteristics. His philosophy became to say exactly what needed saying, then stop immediately.
What amazed Petty about the Beatles was their constant evolution. Each album they released sounded distinctly different from the previous one. They refused to remain static or become too comfortable with any particular sound. Help captured them between different phases of their career, no longer boys but not quite fully mature men yet, actively searching for their next direction. This honest searching process earned Petty's respect. Later in his own career, he would demonstrate the same restlessness and desire to grow while maintaining his core identity. The Beatles taught Petty that craftsmanship mattered tremendously, that artists could be accessible to mainstream audiences while maintaining artistic integrity, and that great songs required careful construction rather than just lucky inspiration. The Byrds album Mr. Tambourine Man from 1965 helped Petty discover his ideal guitar sound. The 12-string guitars on this record transformed his understanding of what was possible. Roger McGuinn's Rickenbacker guitar created a jangling sound, like bells ringing or light somehow converted into audio form. The Byrds took Bob Dylan's complex words and made them float and shimmer through the air. Hearing this sound, Petty immediately knew what he wanted for his own music. That chiming, ringing guitar tone became his signature and formed the foundation for the Heartbreakers sound. The Byrds blended folk and rock music before anyone had coined the term folk rock to describe it. Their harmonies resembled the Beatles, but with an edge and underlying melancholy beneath the surface beauty. Some songs sounded simultaneously sad and hopeful. McGuinn's guitar cut through every mix with clarity and sharpness. Petty carefully studied that tone and how it was achieved. Later, his guitarist Mike Campbell would play similar lines with the Heartbreakers, creating that same ringing purity. What Petty particularly loved was the Byrds' restraint. They did not overplay or feel compelled to fill every moment with sound. The guitars had room to breathe and ring out completely. The spaces between notes carried importance. Petty incorporated this principle into his own music. Many of his most famous songs lived within that jangle and chime, guitars that truly sang. The Byrds taught Petty that tone meant everything, that the correct guitar sound could elevate a good song into something great, and that less always produced more impact than excess. Tom Petty considered the Rolling Stones' album Exile on Main Street from 1972 to be the greatest rock album ever created. This record was messy and sprawling, yet completely alive with energy. The Stones recorded it in a basement in France, and listeners could hear the sweat, alcohol, exhaustion, and intensity in every track. Nothing was polished to perfection. Instead, everything was raw and real. Petty heard this roughness and understood immediately. This was how rock and roll should actually sound, lived in, earned through experience, and authentic. The album wandered through blues, country, gospel, and pure rock without apology. Different tracks captured different moods and styles. The Stones were not showing off their skills. They were surviving and making music because they absolutely had to create. Petty loved that desperation and need. Later, one of his own albums would carry similar urgency. What destroyed Petty emotionally was the overall feel of the record.
Exile did not sound like a typical polished studio album. It sounded like a band playing together in an actual room, capturing real moments. Mistakes remained in the final versions, rough edges were never smoothed over. The imperfection was intentional and important. Petty learned from this approach. Later, he would record the Heartbreakers live in the studio with everyone playing simultaneously, capturing genuine moments rather than building songs piece by piece through overdubs. The Rolling Stones taught Petty that rock and roll required danger to stay vital, that playing it safe led to creative death, and that the best albums captured lightning in a bottle, and that artists should never apologize for the scorch marks left behind. Bob Dylan's album Bringing It All Home from 1965 made everything click into place for Petty. This record featured Dylan going electric, which split the music world into opposing camps. One side of the album was acoustic, the other electric, bringing folk and rock together in marriage. Dylan sang poetry backed by a full band, and this fusion revealed Petty's own path forward. He realized musicians could combine meaningful lyrics with strong melodies, combining depth with driving energy, words that mattered with music that moved people. Different tracks demonstrated different approaches. One song spit words rapidly like bullets. Another declared independence from everything false and fake. Dylan showed Petty that song lyrics could transcend simple boy-meets-girl stories. They could tell complex stories, make observations about life, and ask questions without providing easy answers. Petty absorbed these lessons thoroughly. His own later songs would tell stories about real people facing genuine situations, painting pictures and following characters through life's journey. What truly changed Petty was witnessing Dylan's courage. Folk music fans hated the electric sound and called Dylan a traitor to their cause. Dylan did not care about their opinions. He followed the music wherever it needed to go naturally. This deeply inspired Petty. When critics later said his music was too simple or basic, he continued making it anyway. Like Dylan, Petty understood that simple did not mean shallow, and clarity did not mean emptiness. Dylan taught Petty that words carried weight, that musicians could rock hard while still saying something meaningful, and that following personal instincts beat following crowds every single time. Petty loved the rawness of the Animals. Their first American album from 1964 hit with tremendous impact. The lead singer sang blues authentically, as if he had actually lived the experiences described. Their version of an old folk song became devastating and powerful, building tension and release over 6 minutes. Petty learned from this how to allow songs to breathe naturally, letting them unfold without rushing the story. The Animals played British invasion rock infused with American blues soul. Different tracks captured desperation and honesty. The lead vocals were rough, powerful, and completely committed without any polishing or smoothing of edges. This directness spoke directly to Petty's sensibilities. Later, his own vocals would carry that same straightforward, honest quality without tricks or gimmicks.
What Petty loved most was how democratically the band functioned. Every member contributed meaningfully. The organ was as important as the lead vocals. Guitar and bass locked together perfectly. They sounded like a unified unit rather than individual performers. Petty built the Heartbreakers using this same philosophy. Everyone in the band mattered equally, and everyone served the song first. No individual ego was more important than the music itself. The Animals taught Petty that authenticity could not be manufactured or faked, that audiences immediately recognized genuine emotion when they heard it, that commitment to truth exceeded technical perfection in importance, and that heart was ultimately the only thing that truly mattered in rock and roll. The most surprising choice as Petty's favorite album was Roger McGuinn's solo debut from 1973, not a Byrds album, but McGuinn performing alone. This surprised many people, but Petty understood exactly why this record meant so much to him. The album showed what happened when someone who had already achieved tremendous success stripped everything back down, started over from scratch, and found themselves again in the process. McGuinn played that same 12-string Rickenbacker guitar, but in a quieter, more personal way. The songs dealt with themes of searching, wandering, and not having all the answers to life's questions. One particular track captured Petty's own feelings perfectly about the need to keep moving, creating, and never settling into complacency. Other songs were gentle and sad, or proved McGuinn could still rock when the song required it. Mostly, though, the album was intimate and reflective, showing a master displaying his craft without showing off unnecessarily. Petty treasured this humility and refusal to rest on past achievements. McGuinn could have continued making albums that sounded like his famous band forever, riding that success. Instead, he chose to make something honest and personal. What made this album #1 for Petty was what it represented symbolically. McGuinn had been in one of the biggest bands of the 1960s. He could have chased fame endlessly. Instead, he made quiet personal music and stayed true to himself even when it was not popular or commercially advantageous. This integrity became Petty's guiding principle throughout his career. Decades later, when offered opportunities to sell out or compromise his artistic vision, he thought back to this album and McGuinn's example. Roger McGuinn taught Tom Petty his most important lesson of all. Artists must stay true to themselves above all else. Musicians should make the music they need to make regardless of external pressures. Success matters less than honesty and maintaining integrity. The long, difficult road beats taking shortcuts every single time. Tom Petty never stopped being a genuine fan of music throughout his entire life and career. These 7 albums taught him the fundamental principles of simplicity, honesty, courage, and craftsmanship. His own songs connected deeply with audiences because these influential songs had connected with him first on a profound level. He carried these lessons with him always, allowing them to guide his artistic choices and keep him grounded in what mattered most. His legacy stands as proof that staying true to yourself and the music you love creates something lasting and meaningful that touches people across generations.